Good morning and welcome to IMHX Connect. My name is Bonnie Cliff and I'm the content coordinator for IMHX and XPO Logistics. Joining me this morning is Dan Myers, Managing Director for UK and Ireland at XPO Logistics.
Thanks, Bonnie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Not a problem. So we'll be conducting an interview regarding the state of the logistics industry with regards to retail. So the first question I'd like to ask you, Dan, is how well do you think the logistics industry has adapted to meet the challenges of the last 18 months?
I think the word unprecedented has been used an unprecedented number of times during the last 18 months. But I think for sure in terms of the way the entire industry, and many industries for that matter, stepped up to meet the challenges is a true show of character. I think it's at times of hardship and adversity that you really see the strength of people's character, the extra lengths that they're prepared to go to. I was immensely proud to be part of an organisation that adapted very, very quickly to these changes in so many different ways, whether that be the people that were working in our offices, changing their working habits, the guys in the warehouses and the girls in the warehouses, all doing their elements and making sure that we continue to service our customers. And equally, and probably more importantly, the drivers, they were critical in order to ensure that our customers continue to get a supply of goods in some critical industries. And as well, the drivers had to adapt to a multitude of different protocols for each delivery location, each customer. It was immensely challenging for them, and every single one of them stood up to meet that challenge. And for someone that's played a part in this organisation, in this industry for so long, I was immensely proud of what people did during that particular period of time.
I can imagine you are. You mentioned here briefly the changing working habits that people have had to adapt to since the pandemic began. So considering this kind of sustained shift, how do you foresee the blend of the different patterns supporting each other, for example, full-time home workers and those on 0 hours contracts?
I think it's fair to say the pandemic's been a catalyst for a lot of change across a multitude of different activities in terms of people's lives, and work is just one element of that. In terms of the way in which we work, the way in which we communicate, has all changed fundamentally. And some of those changes are going to stick, that's for sure. As an organisation, we recognise that those changes are here to stay in some sense, in some form. And we are adapting and embracing those changes as any organisation would. We're listening to our people, we're listening to what they're saying to us, and they're looking for a degree of flexibility. There's some things that the pandemic has shown them that they want to retain. And we're happy to retain that. I mean, ultimately, as a service organisation, the quality of our service is very much about the quality of the people that we employ. And therefore, to ensure that we've got the very best people completely motivated and focused on serving our customers, we want to make sure that we're attracting that talent. And that means making certain adjustments. So home working or flexible or hybrid working, whatever you want to call it, you know, that'll be a part of what we offer our employees. Will home working 100% of the time be part of where we're at? I don't think that's what people are looking for. For sure, it's not the sort of thing that we're being asked about. I think people enjoy the social element of coming to work, but as well, there's certain key elements that you can't get remotely. One, onboarding new people, helping them sort of grow and train in terms of the organisation. That's not something that you can do remotely. So there's always going to be a need for people to be in the office, as well as that spontaneity. You know, we'd like to think of ourselves as quite creative, and being able to spark off people. Even with the best video technology in the world, there's not that spontaneity and creativity. So for me, there'll be a blend when it comes to hybrid working. We're going to embrace that. We see it's sort of part of what we will do going forwards. We think there's some other fringe benefits, such as the environmental side of things, where people will be travelling less and commuting less. That will be a good thing. And it'll hopefully help us attract and retrain the very, very best people in the industry. When it comes to sort of the 0 hours that you mentioned, to be honest, as an organisation, it's not something that we've ever sort of pushed on particularly hard in terms of 0 hours. We think that people require and deserve an element of job security. So we always find there's a way of ensuring that we can provide that to people, yet still providing that degree of flexibility that our customers need us to provide in terms of peaks and troughs, in terms of activity, seasonal demands. So For us, 0 hours, maybe not, because we don't think that's the right way to go. And certainly when you see people in the gig economy now moving from a sort of contractor employment basis over to an employee-based contractor basis, I think that sort of demonstrates that where we are is probably the right place. I mean, we keep it under review, but you know, where we are is where we feel is right for both ourselves as the employer, our employees, and critically our customer.
Fantastic. Yeah, completely agree. So you would agree that when you hire gig economy workers in the logistics business, you'd want more permanent roles as well to support them.
Absolutely. I mean, we're a business that's been growing double digit for the last 3-4 years. And part of that means we've been creating a huge amount of employment. But it's not just the new roles that we're creating as part of our growth. It's the fact that we're able to create a lot of opportunities for our existing people. So a huge number of people have been promoted in the last few years. Around about 60% of the people that go into graded roles are internal promotions, which is, you know, a real sort of testimony to the amount of time, effort, and investment we put into people. And again, it really does come back to, you know, the talent that we try and recruit. You know, people with headroom, people that want to make a difference, and people with ambition.
So Dan, can you please describe for us how consumers have changed over the last 18 months? Have there been any specific trends?
That's a really interesting question. And I think it touches on a lot of different things in terms of technology and in terms of psychology, in terms of the way people behave. We've seen a lot of changes, and the pandemic's been an accelerant of some of those changes. But one of the things that, if you look back over history, you can see is that consumer behaviour's always changed. It's always evolved as technology's evolved and things and expectations have evolved. So this change, although it's been accelerated by COVID and been pushed on at a rate of knots, the reality was that change was always there. But that change continues, and organisations that recognise that change is continuing are the ones that are going to be successful in the future. Ones that don't accept the need to change and reflect what their consumers are looking for are the ones that ultimately tend to fail. So for sure, let's say there's been a big change, big step in terms of movement to online, and that will continue. And in terms of the speed at which consumers are looking for that fulfillment, so from pressing the buy button to the order being fulfilled and being delivered, is getting shorter. In fact, that's probably the new battlefront for many retailers in terms of how can they reduce that order lead time and make the entire process as seamless as possible and easily and as easy and convenient as possible. I mean, you look at it even from the very start of the sales process, like the buy now button. I mean, it's a terrible invention because it feels like you've not spent any money and you can buy something so quickly. And everything now pretty much can be next day delivery. I mean, I read quite recently that, you know, something like 60% of consumers will abandon a basket if they can't have next day delivery. But
Wow.
Next day, yeah, I know, amazing, isn't it? Just walk away because they're not meeting the expectations in terms of not the product. The product's good, you know, right product, right price, but not right place and not right time. And that is becoming more and more important. And that's what struck me as amazing as a logistician. And maybe I'm a bit biased, being in the industry, but I think sometimes in terms of the 4 fundamentals of a successful sort of consumer experience is right product, right price, right time, right place. And historically, there's been a huge weighting towards those first 2 fundamentals, and the second 2 have been somewhat neglected. But now, not at all. In fact, that is the point at which people are differentiating, the speed of fulfillment. You know, gone is the sort of, you know, order this week, maybe get it delivered next week. It's ordered this tonight for tomorrow morning's delivery. And now we're seeing not only same day, and retailers are now moving into that space. We saw announcements from M&S quite recently in terms of same day fulfillment, but fulfillment within 10 minutes. You know, you've got entire new businesses growing and evolving, providing sort of almost instant fulfillment, instant gratification. And that is a new battlefront for many, many retailers in terms of how to continue to adapt to meet this expectation. And it's not just time as well. I think it'd be naive just to think it was time, but reputations are hard won and easy lost. And my predecessor, I remember one of the sort of nuggets of wisdom that he left me with, which is you gain credibility in inches and you lose it in feet. And these days, in the social media environment in which we live, it's very easy to lose that reputation for service and quality if you don't get that delivery service absolutely bang on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see the speed of fulfillment is also can be at odds with the environmental costs if you're not using a sustainable way for your last mile as well.
And that's another big challenge that the industry's got to face into. You know, we have all seen the growth in terms of the number of vans and small vehicles delivering up and down our streets. It's been huge, no doubt about it. And obviously that has an environmental impact without any doubt whatsoever. And we can look at things such as electric vehicles or electric bikes or other technologies such as that, maybe at some point in the future, maybe hydrogen vehicles, we shall see. But ultimately, it's the number as well of vehicles that are up and down the streets. And the environmental factor is one, but there's a social factor as well in terms of road safety. Just the sheer volume of traffic that's generated is not insignificant. So I think there will be changes there. Certainly some local governments, some local sort of metropolitan areas have looked at consolidation centres for inner city deliveries. I think we'll see more of that as consolidation tries to drive that delivery density and reduce the number of deliveries made to certain areas. I mean, there used to be a service like that. It was called the Royal Mail, where they're delivered everywhere every day. But now we've got a multitude of carriers that are all up and down every street every day. So I think legislation will push some changes, and I think technology will push some changes. But yeah, I don't think we can be blind to the environmental impact of the change in consumer habits, that's for sure.
Of course. So as well as the environmental impacts, do you think there are any other common pitfalls in adapting to these sustained shifts in demand?
Change is always fraught with risk. I don't think there's anyone in any industry that's not seen change missed or mismanaged. I think in terms of the first instance, it's to catch the need to change. And I think my advice to any organisation would be to be outward looking and forward facing, stay close to the customer and understand what their current needs are and what their future requirements are likely to be. Be ever so careful in terms of taking at face value what the customer says, because the customer doesn't always know what the customer wants. And there's some great examples back in history of that. I think it was someone like Henry Ford that said if he'd asked his customer what they would like, they'd have said they'd want a faster horse, not an automobile. Yeah. And again, probably with the advent of the iPad, you know, that was a visionary Steve Jobs. You know, if we'd asked the consumer, they'd probably ask for a more powerful, faster laptop, not a touch screen way of interacting with the device and that sort of type of technology. So I think it's always got to be outward facing, forward looking, accepting that you're going to need to continue to change and evolve. And then I think it's having a clear plan. The devil's always in the detail when it comes to change and making sure it's properly resourced. The number of plans that fail due to a lack of resource and investment is staggering in my experience. And it's one thing that has never been lost on me to invest up front. It's always far easier to take resource out of a successful project than try and force additional resource in when the projects may be drifting off course.
Okay, so if you were going to address these pitfalls, which technologies would you foresee? Which one would you foresee as becoming long-lasting? And are there any that you'll consider fads or just flashy?
It's a really interesting question. There's a lot of things that may look like fads that end up sticking. And it's difficult to know what the adoption will be with anything that's brand new. I do think that a lot of industries, and certainly when it comes to supply chain, need to think long and hard about projects that have got long-term paybacks. So when you look at huge automation, you need to be certain that your profile of business is going to remain pretty constant for a period of time. Simply because you build automation to deal with a specific profile of business. And therefore, if your payback's over a very long period of time, it's very difficult to be sure that that profile will remain as it is today. It won't be disrupted by some sort of change in consumer behaviour. So I think it's really important to sort of remember to think about what change might impact you, how it might impact you, and how you can remain agile. I think one of the key strengths of any business, the one key characteristic that marks out a successful business from the not so successful business, and it's not those that are technologically advanced, not at all. It's not those that are the smartest or the cleverest. It's those that are the fastest and most agile. It's those that can very quickly see something, see the value in it and adopt. There's a lot of value sometimes being in a fast second.
So if we're all going to aim for this level of agility, what would be your top tips for logisticians to react swiftly to consumer demands?
There's always a risk in people becoming wedded to a certain way of doing business. And I think that's particularly the case in successful organisations. I've seen businesses that have been super successful for years, decades even, industry leads in terms of margin and profitability. And then something changes. And all of a sudden the profitability takes a bit of a knock. And people then look back and think, well, it's a blip. Yeah, it's just a blip. It'll come back. You know, we've been really successful before. We'll be successful again. And then they have another bad year and another bad year. But because they've been wedded to this way of doing business, this sort of, it becomes like an anchor. And it's something that stops them moving forwards. And it can take a very long time for them to realise that the world in which they're operating's changed, and the way in which they were operating before is no longer applicable, or it certainly won't be a successful recipe as it was in the past. And that can be for a lot of different reasons. You know, it can be technological, and it can be that sort of, you know, consumer behaviour. It can be a lot of different things. I mean, I remember a while ago someone asking me a question about who invented digital photography. And it was invented by Kodak. And the reason that they never exploited it is because they made an absolute fortune out of selling film. And Kodak went bust. Someone bought the name, but Kodak ceased to exist as its own business because it was very much wedded to a way of doing business. So I think it's really important that people accept the need to continue to change, not be wedded to some sort of dogmatic way of doing business in the future. But ultimately, no business has got a right to continue to exist. We earn that right by ensuring that we satisfy the needs of our clients and our customers.
Fantastic. A lot of food for thought there. Dan, thank you very much for your time today. That's all we've got time for.
Thank you.